She had 3 hours to live. Maybe less. The Sahara Desert stretched endlessly in every direction. No water, no shade, no hope. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her vision blurred. She collapsed onto the scorching sand, certain this was the end. But then she saw him, a figure emerging from the heat waves, walking toward her with purpose, carrying something that would save her life. What happened next became one of the most extraordinary love stories ever told. A romance born from desperation, built on survival, and sustained for 40 years against impossible odds. The year was 1984. Meet Sarah Meacham, a 28-year-old British photojournalist with an unquenchable thirst for adventure. While her friends were settling down, bouging gooses, and climbing the corporate ladder, Sarah was chasing stories in the most remote corners of the globe. For 5 years, she'd immersed herself in cultures across Africa, Asia, and South America. Her stunning photographs graced the pages of National Geographic, Time magazine, and The Guardian. But Sarah craved something more. She was on the hunt for the one story that would define her entire career, a true legacy. That defining story was waiting for her in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Sahara Desert. Her mission? To document the lives of the Tuareg people, known as the legendary Blue People of the desert because of the indigo dye from their clothing that would stain their skin. Their ancient traditions were on the brink of vanishing. The assignment sounded straightforward enough. Spend 6 weeks traveling with a Tuareg caravan, capturing their way of life through her lens, before the modern world erased it completely. Sarah was nothing if not a meticulous planner. She threw herself into preparation, studying Arabic and the Tuareg language, Tamashek. She underwent rigorous desert survival training and invested in the absolute best camera equipment money could buy. She felt ready for anything, but there's an old saying that no plan ever survives first contact with reality. And that's doubly true when your reality is the Sahara Desert. Little did she know, her carefully laid plans were about to be shattered. On October 12, 1984, Sarah touched down in Taman, a dusty outpost town in southern Algeria that served as the gateway to her expedition. Her guide, a man named Ahmad, was there to meet her, and the caravan was ready to depart, heading northeast toward the mystical Tassili Nazir Plateau. But a dark shadow was looming on the horizon, one she couldn't possibly see. What Sarah didn't know, what no one could have known, was that, in just 9 days, she would be forced to make an impossible choice, a choice between life and death. And the decision she made in that moment would not only alter the course of her life, but would also uncover a secret hidden in the sands for centuries. This is the story of what happened next. Her journey began with a sense of wonder. The landscapes were breathtaking, towering rock formations that looked like Martian cathedrals and sand dunes that shifted and whispered with the wind. The Tuareg people welcomed her with quiet dignity. She photographed everything, the men guiding their camels with an expertise born from generations of knowledge, the women preparing meals over open fires, their faces etched with the stories of the desert. She was capturing the soul of the Sahara. Then, on the 9th day, disaster struck. When the storm finally passed, she was alone, completely and utterly alone. Her water was running low, her compass was broken, and she had no idea which way to go. As panic began to set in, she spotted something in the distance. It wasn't the caravan, it was an ancient ruin, half buried in the sand, a place that wasn't on any of her maps. Desperate for shelter, she stumbled towards it. Inside, she found more than just a refuge from the sun. She found markings on the walls, strange symbols that were not Tuareg, not Arabic, not anything she recognized. And in a hidden chamber, she found a skeleton, and clutched in its hand was a leather-bound journal. As she opened it, she realized she had stumbled upon a mystery far older and more dangerous than her original assignment. The journal told the story of a lost expedition from a century earlier, a group of explorers who weren't just searching for ancient cities, but for a legendary oasis said to hold a power that could change the world. They found it, but it came at a terrible price. The journal was a warning. As Sarah read on, she understood the horrifying truth. The storm wasn't a random act of nature, and she wasn't lost by accident. She had been led there. The choice was no longer just about survival. It was about protecting a secret that people would kill for. Alone in the desert, with a forgotten history in her hands, Sarah Mitchell's real journey. The first week of Sarah Mitchell's journey across the Sahara was a dream realized. Her small caravan, an intimate group of 8 Tuareg men and 12 camels, moved with the unhurried rhythm of the desert itself. They traveled in the gentle coolness of dawn and dusk, a slow, steady procession through an ocean of sand. Sarah, an experienced traveler and photographer from London, had sought this very experience, the raw, unfiltered beauty of one of Earth's most extreme environments. Her guide, Ahmed, a man in his 50s, with a face weathered by a lifetime under the Saharan sun, became her mentor. His English was fragmented, but his connection to the desert was profound. He taught her the language of the dunes, showing her how to read their shifting patterns to find the safest path. He revealed the desert's hidden secrets, like how to locate precious water buried deep beneath the sand. At night, under a breathtaking canopy of stars, he taught her how to navigate using constellations that shone with an intensity she'd never witnessed in the light-polluted skies of home. Sarah documented everything. Her camera was an extension of her eyes, capturing the ethereal moment when the first rays of morning light painted the dunes in shades of liquid gold. She filmed the intricate, meditative tea ceremony the men performed each evening, a ritual steeped in tradition and community. She recorded the haunting, melancholic songs they sang around the crackling campfire, their voices carrying on the still night air. Her journal from this time, which would later be published, reads like a love letter to the desert. One entry, from day 4, describes a sandstorm, absolutely terrifying and absolutely beautiful. She wrote, "The men simply covered their faces and continued on, as if it were a light drizzle. I'm learning that the desert demands respect, not fear." 2 days later, she reflected on the unique quality of the quiet. "The silence here is unlike anything I've ever experienced. In London, silence is just the absence of noise. Here, it's a living presence. It has weight and texture. You can feel it enveloping you." This idyllic adventure, this communion with nature, was what she had yearned for. But the desert is as unforgiving as it is beautiful. And on the 8th day, the dream began to curdle into a nightmare. Sarah woke before dawn, her body gripped by severe stomach cramps. She had contracted a virulent bacterial infection, most likely from a contaminated water source. The illness took hold with terrifying speed. By midday, a high fever had set in, leaving her weak and disoriented. By evening, she could barely stand on her own. Ahmed, ever the stoic desert veteran, was concerned but didn't show panic. They were only 2 days' travel from the next settlement, a small oasis where she could get proper medical attention. He administered rehydration salts and insisted she stop walking, placing her carefully onto the back of one of the camels. 2 days, he reassured her, his voice a steady presence in her growing fear. "You are strong. You can make it 2 days." Sarah, shivering despite the heat, clung to his words, wanting desperately to believe him. But her body was waging a war against itself, and it was losing. On the morning of October 21st, day 9 of the expedition, disaster struck. The caravan awoke to an empty space where Sarah should have been. During the night, trapped in a feverish delirium, she had unknowingly stumbled away from the camp. When she finally regained a sliver of consciousness, the sun was just beginning to rise, and she was utterly, terrifyingly alone. An endless panorama of sand dunes stretched out in every direction. The caravan was gone. Panic seized her. She screamed for Ahmed, for anyone, until her throat was raw and her voice gave out. She frantically tried to retrace her steps, but the night's wind, the desert's constant companion, had already erased every track, smoothing the sand into a pristine, featureless canvas. With a surge of adrenaline, she scrambled to the top of the highest dune she could see, her heart pounding with a desperate hope. She scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of life, for the familiar shape of the camels, for the dark figures of the men. There was nothing, just a vast, empty expanse of sand and sky. Sarah Mitchell, sick, dehydrated, and with only a single bottle of water, was lost in the heart of the Sahara. Drawing on her experience as a traveler, she fought back the rising tide of despair. The first rule of being lost is to stay put. Wandering aimlessly would only deplete her energy, use up her water, and make it impossible for rescuers to find her. She found a small outcropping of rocks that offered a sliver of shade from the relentless sun. She sat, took a small, measured sip from her water bottle, and forced herself to think logically. Ahmed would realize she was missing. He was an expert tracker. He would come back for her. It was a race against time. The question wasn't if he would search, but whether he would find her before the desert claimed her. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. The sun climbed higher in the sky, transforming the air into a furnace. The rocks she huddled against grew hot to the touch. Her water supply dwindled with each precious sip. The fever raged, blurring the edges of her vision. The world began to warp and distort. Hallucinations flickered at the edge of her consciousness. The face of her mother, the front door of her childhood home, disconnected fragments of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. She knew she was fading. With what little strength she had left, she pulled her journal and a pen from her bag. Her hand trembled as she wrote what she believed would be her final entry. "I'm not ready to die." The entry begins, "I thought I was brave, coming here alone." But bravery and foolishness look the same until the end of the story. She paused, took a ragged breath, and continued, "If anyone finds this, tell my mother I love her. Tell her I died doing what I loved. Tell her it didn't hurt." She closed the journal, carefully tucked it back into her bag, and leaned her head back against the hot rock. Her eyelids felt heavy, too heavy to keep open. She surrendered to the exhaustion, to the heat, to the inevitable, and let her eyes drift shut. The world went dark, and that's when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong in the empty silence of the desert. The distinct, rhythmic crunch of footsteps on sand. Sarah opened her eyes, certain she was hallucinating. The shimmering heat made the world waver, but the sound was real. Footsteps, soft, rhythmic, crunching on the sand. A figure was approaching, moving with a confident, unhurried stride. The stride of someone who belonged here, someone who knew exactly where they were going. As he drew closer, the mirage solidified into a man. He was Dwarig, dressed in traditional flowing blue robes that seemed to absorb the sky itself. His face was almost entirely wrapped in a tagelmas turban, a deep indigo fabric that hid his features, all except for his eyes. This wasn't Ahmad, the kind old guide who had led her caravan. This man was younger, taller, and his eyes, they were striking, dark, intense, and filled with a calm focus that seemed to cut right through her delirium. He knelt beside her, his movements graceful and efficient. Then, in perfect, unaccented English, he spoke 5 words that would echo in her memory for the rest of her life. "You're safe. Now, I've gotcha." His name was Mousa Ag Aklu. He was 32 years old, born into a Tuareg family that had roamed the vast Sahara for generations, their lineage written in the shifting sands. Mousa was a master navigator, a desert whisperer who could read the sun, the stars, and the very texture of the earth. He was also a healer, carrying the ancient knowledge of traditional medicine passed down through his ancestors. He had been searching for Sarah for nearly 6 hours. 6 hours under the relentless, unforgiving sun. Ahmed, her original guide, had sent him. When they discovered Sarah was missing from the camp, panic had set in. Ahmed, knowing the immediate danger, had made a critical decision. He would guide the main caravan to the nearest settlement to summon a larger rescue party, while simultaneously sending their very best tracker, Mousa, into the wilderness alone. Mousa had followed signs that were completely invisible to an untrained eye: a single disturbed stone, a subtle scuff mark on a rock, an unusual pattern in the sand where Sarah had stumbled. To him, these were not random marks. They were a story, a trail as clear as a paved road. He had tracked Sarah the way his ancestors had tracked gazelle in water sources for centuries. a skill born from necessity and perfected over millennia. He was reading the desert's secret language, and it was leading him straight to her. When he found her, he knew she was close to the edge. He gave her water, but not in a desperate flood. He administered it in small, careful sips, understanding that overwhelming a severely dehydrated body could be just as fatal as thirst itself. He pulled a small leather pouch from his robes and mixed a paste from dried desert plants, a traditional remedy for the infection that was now raging through her body. He gently applied it to the wound on her leg. Then, in an act of incredible self-sacrifice, he created shade for her. He used his own robes, the very fabric that protected him from the brutal sun, and fashioned a small canopy to shield her from the heat and cool her burning fever. And as he worked, he talked to her. His voice was a constant, calm presence in the overwhelming silence of the desert. He was keeping her conscious, keeping her tethered to the world, keeping her fighting. "Tell me about London," he said, his voice soft but clear. "I have never seen a city. Tell me about the buildings that touched the sky." So Sarah talked. Through cracked lips, and with a strength she didn't know she possessed, she painted pictures for him with her words. She described the majestic Tower Bridge spanning the Thames, the chaotic, vibrant energy of Piccadilly Circus, the way the setting sun turned the river to liquid gold. She told him about the iconic red double-decker buses, the ritual of afternoon tea, and the rain. She described the endless, soft, grey rain of an English winter, a concept so alien, so impossible to imagine in this sun-scorched land. And Moussa listened. He listened as if her every word was a precious drop of water, a treasure found in the emptiness. It was a strange, surreal conversation between two worlds. A woman from a city of 9 million people, lost and dying in the vast emptiness. A man who had never left that emptiness, calmly pulling her back from the brink with ancient knowledge and a quiet, insistent voice. Her descriptions of a crowded, rain-soaked world, and his questions about a life he couldn't comprehend, formed a fragile bridge between them, a connection forged in the crucible of survival. About 3 hours later, a new sound broke the silence, the distant rumble of a vehicle. Ahmet had returned, bringing a rescue team from the settlement. By the time they arrived, a small miracle had occurred. Sarah's fever had broken. The combination of the traditional medicine, the precious shade, and the careful hydration had stabilized her. She was weak, exhausted, but she was going to live. As the team carefully prepared a stretcher to transport her back to civilization, Sarah reached out and grabbed Mouse's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raw but filled with profound gratitude. "You saved my life." For the first time, Mousa slowly unwrapped his tagelmust. As the indigo fabric fell away, it revealed his full face, a strong kind, features weathered by the sun and wind. And then he smiled. It was a warm, genuine smile that started in his eyes and lit up his entire face, chasing away the last of the desert's harshness. "The desert gives, and the desert takes," he said, his voice as calm as ever. "Today, it gave. I was merely the instrument." Sarah was evacuated to a modern hospital in Algiers. She spent the next 2 weeks recovering, hooked up to 4 drips and monitors. The doctors were blunt. They confirmed she had been hours, maybe even minutes, from death. The bacterial infection had been aggressive, and her level of dehydration was critical. Intisara. That combination is almost always a death sentence. By all medical logic, she should have died out there, but she didn't. And as she lay in that sterile, white hospital bed, listening to the rhythmic beeping of machines, her thoughts kept drifting back to the endless expanse of sand and the man who had found her there. She replayed every moment, his calm presence that had banished her fear, his gentle, capable hands as he tended to her, and his voice, a steady anchor in the darkness, talking about cities and rain, pulling her back from the edge of oblivion. Sareli said with a startling, heart-thumping clarity that she needed to see him again. It wasn't just about thanking him. She'd already done that. This was something different. Something had happened in those desperate hours in the desert. A connection had been forged. Something deep, inexplicable, and utterly undeniable. It was a bond that felt more real and more powerful than anything she had ever known. 3 weeks after her dramatic rescue, against the stern advice of her doctors and the bewildered protests of her editor in London, Sarah Mitchell walked out of the hospital and went straight to the airport. She bought a one-way ticket back to the south of Algeria, back towards the gateway to the Sahara. Finding Mausa was anything but easy. The Tuareg people are nomadic by nature, constantly moving across the vast desert. There are no addresses, no phone books, and certainly no GPS coordinates. Sarah hired Ahmed, her original guide, once again, and together they set out to find Mausa's family clan. It took 11 long days of searching, 11 days of traveling from one settlement to another, asking questions and following whispers of leads. At night, gathered around the campfire, Sarah would practice the phrases she had rehearsed over and over in her mind. Finally, on the 12th day, they found him. Mausa was with his family's camp, about 200 kilometers northeast of where he'd miraculously rescued Sarah. When he saw her approaching, his eyes widened in genuine shock. No one, absolutely no one, had expected her to come back. What happened next has been told in various interviews Sarah gave over the years. The exact words might differ slightly each time, but the heart of the story remains the same. Sarah walked up to Mausa, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Through Ahmed, who translated between English and Tamashek, she said, "You saved my life in the desert, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I haven't stopped thinking about you. Because when I close my eyes, I see your face. Because I believe the desert didn't just give me my life back. It gave me something more. It gave me you." The entire camp fell silent. This was unprecedented. A foreign woman boldly declaring her feelings for a Tuareg man, right there in front of his entire family. Mausa stood frozen for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "Through Ahmed," he replied, "I have traveled this desert my entire life. I know every star, every dune, every hidden spring. I thought I knew all the treasures the Sahara held. But I was wrong. The greatest treasure I ever found was you, that day in the sand. and I would search 1,000 deserts to find you again. They were married just 4 months later in a beautiful ceremony that blended British and Tuareg traditions. Sarah wore a white wedding dress adorned with traditional Tuareg jewelry, while Moussa wore his finest robes. Ahmet proudly served as a witness, grinning from ear to ear. It should have been the fairy tale ending, but it was only the beginning, because loving someone from a completely different world isn't a fairy tale. In fact, it's one of the hardest things a person can do. Sarah and Moussa faced obstacles that would have shattered most relationships. There were vast cultural differences, frustrating language barriers, and intense pressure from both of their families. Sarah's mother was horrified. "You're throwing your life away for a man you barely know, in a place with no running water," she cried during one difficult phone call. Moussa's family was equally concerned. "She's an outsider," some of the elders warned. "She'll never truly understand our ways. She'll leave when the romance fades." For the first 2 years, Sarah and Moussa lived a semi-nomadic life, splitting their time between the deep desert and the town of Tamanrasset. Sarah continued her photography, now focusing on documenting her unique position as an outsider who had become an insider in Tuareg culture. But the challenges were real and constant. Sarah struggled with the sheer physical demands of desert life. Moussa, in turn, was overwhelmed when they visited London, lost in the noise, the crowds, and the relentless pace. They argued, they had doubts. There were moments when ending it all seemed like the kindest, most merciful choice. But what kept them together was something far deeper than romance. It was respect. It was a profound understanding and a genuine commitment to building a life that honored both of their worlds. Slowly, painfully, but beautifully, they found their rhythm. Sarah learned to make traditional Tuareg tea, mastering the intricate ceremony. Moussa learned to read and write English. She taught him the art of photography. He taught her how to navigate by the stars. They built a small house on the outskirts of Tamanrasset, a home base they could always return to between their travels. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, each given names from both of their cultures. And through it all, they loved each other with the fierce intensity of 2 people who knew, better than anyone, how easily they could have lost each other forever. Because Sarah never forgot those desperate hours in the desert. Today, Sarah Mitchell is 68 years old and Moussa is 72. They've been married for an incredible 40 years. Their children are now grown, living lives that beautifully bridge the continents, and their grandchildren are fluent in Tamashek, English, and French. Walking into their home is like stepping into a museum of their life together. The walls are filled with photographs, a visual diary documenting for decades of love, adventure, and the family they built from the ground up. In 2010, Sarah published a memoir titled The Man Who Found Me, and it became an international bestseller. In it, she shares a powerful reflection on their journey. She writes, "People often ask me if I believe in fate. Did the desert bring Moussa and me together for a reason? Was it destiny? I don't really know. What I do know is this. Love isn't about finding the perfect person. It's choosing to build a life with someone day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She continues, "Moussa and I come from completely different worlds. We always will, but over the years, We've created a third world, one that is uniquely ours, where neither of us is a stranger. And that world, that's what we call home. There are countless love stories in the world. We hear about chance meetings, love at first sight, and romances that defy all the odds. But very few are as extraordinary as this one. Think about it. A British photojournalist and a Tuareg nomad brought together by a vast, unforgiving desert. A desert that almost claimed one life and completely shaped the other. It was a miracle that blossomed into a marriage, a rescue that turned into a romance, a single, critical moment that stretched into a beautiful lifetime. Sarah and Mouse's story is a powerful reminder that love doesn't follow our carefully laid plans. It doesn't respect boundaries or borders we put up. It certainly doesn't care about our differences in culture, language, or background. Love simply is. And when we are brave enough to embrace it, despite all the obstacles, despite the fear, despite that little voice in our head that says, "This is impossible," that's when the real miracles happen. That's when the desert gives its greatest gift. It wasn't just survival. It was a reason to survive. Thank you so much for watching this incredible true story. If Sarah and Mouse's journey moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing real-life stories. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe in fate? Do you think some people are just meant to find each other? And if you enjoyed this video, you should check out my other video on another extraordinary love story that defied the odds. Until next time, remember, the best stories aren't found in fiction. They're lived by real people in real places, proving that truth is often stranger and more beautiful than anything we could ever imagine.